Hello boys and girls, today I'm going to talk to you about a concept that I friggin' love. It's called Ferocity of Intent, and it gives me the opportunity to draw parallels between the world of psychology and the world of martial arts, which is one of my friggin' favourite things to do. So when I was a martial arts instructor, when I used to teach self-protection, self-defense, combatives, what I became known for was more the psychological side of things, more adapting concepts like NLP to combatives and to self-protection in particular. I made a pretty good name for myself in that field. In the end, there were special forces units, there was bodyguards, the air marshals in their training centre that used to be in Nevada and Las Vegas. They used to use my stuff, not exclusively, they used other people's stuff as well. And the British riot, the British Centre for Training Riot Police used to order all my stuff as well. But I think they weren't really learning how to do punches and kicks and elbows, because there's plenty of people out there already teaching that and teaching it better than I could. But they came to me for psychology training, and particularly as it related to focus and the focus of intent. Because if you're going to deal with the stress of violence, I always say it's a two-way street. There's the stress of receiving violence, and then there's the stress of delivering violence, because being in an aggressive state and having the violent intent to do violence to another human being is actually enormously stressful. And that, even if you win a fight, you can end up with PTSD type symptoms and CPTSD type symptoms, because it's a stressful thing. I'm using the word stress the way it would be used in biology, the way it would be used in psychology, not in the way it's used in common parlance. So it's a pressure applied to the system that begins to cause wear and tear. So stress can actually feel very, very good. It could be a joyous experience to become stressful for some, but it's not ideally, it's not good for you. It's not necessarily where you want to be. Talked to a guy recently who gets terrible digestive problems when he works. He works very, very long days, and he's an adrenophile. He's addicted to his own adrenaline. He's constantly up doing things. He's running around and saying to me, "You're stressed." So, no, I'm not. I love my job. I feel really good. I spring out of bed and I'm ready to go. But yes, but it's still stress. That's why your digestive system is troubled when you're in work. But when you're on holiday, even though you're drinking more alcohol than you would be and eating spicy foods, you don't get these stomach problems. So there's that stress there. When I'm teaching people techniques in psychology and I'm trying to train them to get better, obviously I can't possess them and get into their body and do it for them. At some point they have to do it for themselves. Exactly as you would in the martial arts or in strength training, or if you're going to become a better artist, or you're going to become a better guitar player or a singer or an actor, you've got to rep it out, you've got to do your drills, and you have to train yourself, because these things are skills, which is one of the things in psychology I think gets missed in the areas of counselling and psychotherapy, that actually you need to develop new skill sets, and it should be drilled as a skill set. So sometimes I give people a technique and I'll say, okay, here's a way of dealing with CPTSD. Here's a hand mnemonic, and I developed a hand mnemonic a couple of years ago to remind people, several times a day, to touch each finger of their hand and to remind themselves of 5 key principles that would diminish emotional flashbacks and help them to overcome their CPTSD symptoms. I remember once teaching a seminar of 100 people, and I taught them that at 9:30 in the morning, and I said, guys, as I'm talking, you can do this inside of your own head. You can go through all this. As you go on your breaks, you go for your coffee, you're chatting to other people, you can do this and you can go through it inside of your own head. And they're like, yeah, we totally will do that thing that you just showed us that could take us out of enormous pain and make our lives much more enjoyable and fun. And at 10:30, an hour later, I asked them how many of them had done it. And I think 20 hands went up out of 100. Then at lunchtime I asked them, how many of you have been using this technique? And then 15 hands went up out of 100 people. And then at 3:30 I said to them, how many of you done it? And 6 people were still doing it. Now I'm talking about people who travelled. Some of them had travelled from Canada, from America. They'd been on like 10-hour flights to come and see me because they're in so much pain and so much desperate need to feel better, but they still weren't applying the fucking techniques I was showing them to apply. Why? Because there's a lack of ferocity of intent. How does this apply to the martial arts? Well, in the martial arts, I would notice when I was training people, and I had this little move that I got from my major martial arts influence, a chap called Bob Spoor, and he taught me something called a C grip, which is where you take your hand in a letter C like this, your thumb and your middle finger. He always said it wasn't his, but I don't remember him telling me where he actually got it from. I think it was I can't remember actually. So he would teach us to do that, and as a young man, I started to do nightclub security work, and I went onto the doors, and occasionally when I had to restrain people or throw them out of clubs, I would, or if people got aggressive with me, I would come inside their centre line, grab them around the back of the neck in like a Muay Thai neck clinch, one-handed, and I would grab them around the throat and then move them to move their head. And the few times that this happened in the early days, I noticed that it was very, very effective at getting people to shut down and to get them out. And a couple of times I actually rendered the person unconscious. Don't try this at home, kids. I didn't know at the time, because I thought it was a way of sealing off the esophagus, the larynx, the windpipe. I thought it was a choke. So I was like, oh, this is a choke. So you actually squeeze where the breath is coming through, and it will make people, you know, start to calm down or to slow down because they can't breathe. Actually, what I was doing, I found later, is you're attacking the carotid sinus and the vagus nerve. And it's different, it has a different level of sensitivity in different human beings. But if you grab hold of somebody by that, whether the vagus nerve is stimulated into a total, what happens is the blood pressure starts to go down very, very rapidly. Some massage therapists will train you to do this when you have anxiety, to actually massage this whole area. And what it can do is it can start to bring the heart rate down. If you grab it too hard in another human being, it can actually switch them off, and the body and the brain goes, oh shit, there's been a sudden drop in blood pressure, unconsciousness, and you drop down. Now I would teach that on seminars, and I'd be like, guys and girls, it's a really, really good move. If you're inside, you're at this range, and you get the opportunity, you grab the person around the neck, and then you can move them, you can move their head. And I'd be teaching this in seminars, and people would go, it's not working. I'd say, why? What do you mean it's not working? It's just, I can't do this. And I'd be like, okay, show it to me. So here's me, I'm going, right, you come inside, you're at a close range, you grab hold of the neck and you start to move them. Did you see that? You saw that. Here's what they do. They stand like this, with their shoulders square on, put one floppy, loose, limp-wristed hand up and go, on the person's neck, and go, not working, and then they'll rest their other hand limply on the shoulder. I'm like, what is that? That's not even good massage. That's not even, I don't even know what you're doing. Like, if this was hypnosis and you were like waving your hand in the person's face and you had your hand on their shoulder to anchor it, even that would be crap, because there's no confidence in your touch. Like, get hold of the person. I didn't say do this. Nah. Did I? Do this. Because it's a fight, right? So there's a violent intent here. Otherwise, what the fuck are you doing grabbing somebody around the throat? If there's no reason, if you're not under threat, why are you doing this? Like, if you do that to somebody because they bump into you in a bar, that's illegal. You'll go to jail. So I would show this to people, and they would say, it doesn't work. The technique, the externalized technique doesn't work. And I'd be like, no, you not working. You not doing it with ferocity of intent. So then, as I was working in that field, I think a lot of these debates have probably died away now. I found there was always huge debates raging over whether this style was better than that style, whether the modern styles were better than the traditional styles. And whenever that debate would come up, people would always say, well, hang on a second, there are these traditional stylists that we all know of. Some of them very, very famously worked next to my hometown. They worked for a friend of my father's. So within the martial arts community, there are two very well-known names, a New Zealand guy called Gary Spears, or perhaps it's pronounced Gary Spires, and sadly he's passed away, and Terry O'Neill. Terry O'Neill's pretty sure he's from Liverpool, but at this time he would work in Birkenhead. I can't remember the name of the nightclub. It's right, I think it's Argyle Street in Birkenhead, if you know that area. One of my dad's mates ran the club. And within the martial arts community, they're very, very well known because one was a Goju-Ryu karate guy, that's Gary Spires, and Terry O'Neill is Shotokan. Classically trained, traditional guys. I think they both trained over in Japan, very, very famous within karate and very, very famous within the field of self-defense. And people say, well, look, these guys were doing traditional karate and they would beat the fuck out of anybody who tried to attack them. So how do we have this, how do you create this logical structure inside your head that the modern style is good and the traditional style is bad? Doesn't work. The logic falls down, and I'll get to why in a second. There are numerous examples of that. I'm just giving you famous examples and ones that are particularly close to home for me. These guys were legends within that field, especially within that time. I think that was in the 80s. I'm pretty sure the club was called, maybe it was called Rupert's, and there was another club that they used to work on. Anyway, there's stuff of legend in that field. There was another guy that I used to work the door with who was a traditional, I didn't work the door with them. That sentence sounded like I worked the door with them. I was a kid when they were doing door work in Birkenhead. I would have been about 10 years old. But when I started doing door work again back in 2011 in London, there was a guy that I worked with who was a pure traditional jiu-jitsu stylist. Now, in the field I was working in at that time, we were told by the combatives gurus, by the modern martial arts gurus, arm locks don't work. So therefore traditional jiu-jitsu is nonsense. Only Brazilian jiu-jitsu has any merit now. Only, that's, for those of you who aren't familiar with martial arts, that's a different, let's not get into that, but it's judo. It was originally judo with a sort of more of a street element to it that then developed into what is essentially submission, all-out submission wrestling, kind of. And then there's the whole issue of valet tudo and all that. Don't worry about that. So we were told traditional arm locks don't work. But I would see him regularly on the door applying traditional arm locks and wrist locks straight out of the jiu-jitsu syllabus on fully resisting people who were quite a bit bigger than him. I'd also see him applying traditional judo and jiu-jitsu throws. And when he was asked about that, he would just say, well, it's my intent to make that work. So when that arm lock is in my head, he's a black belt in that style, and I'm thinking about putting that on, I'm not fiddling to see if maybe it'll go on. I'm getting this thing on. Or I'm gonna die trying. This arm lock is going on, and out of the door you're gonna go. Imagine if he had gone up to, because he's not a big guy, had gone up to people much bigger than him and was like, oh, let's see if this wrist lock might maybe make, no, it's ferocious. You just grab them, put it on, bang, and out the door they would go. Ferocity of intent. There is no reason whatsoever why you shouldn't develop the same ferocity of intent in making the techniques work from psychology, in making the techniques work in a therapeutic context and saying, I'm gonna make this work or I'm gonna die trying to make this work. That's how I got myself better. That's how I started to recover. It was with ferocity of intent, and I wasn't weak-willed about the process. I was like, I know what it takes to get anything done. I know what it takes to build businesses, because I've developed several now. I know what it takes to get a project together from the act of conception, from the beginning of its concept to its full-blown execution, to it being over and something that you did, is always 5, 10, 15 times bigger, more expensive, more emotion, more blood, sweat and tears than you assume in the beginning. It's always that way, so you have to have that ferocity of intent to see it through all the way to the end. Ladies and gents, if you apply any technique with a limp will, the best techniques in the world are going to become useless. If you apply a crap or a half-hearted technique with ferocity of intent, you'll get results. I claim we could go all the way back to old school Freudian psychoanalysis, and if the client and the therapist is determined to make clunky ideas that we know are out of date have some healing result, we will find one. We will make that work. It's kind of a human cognitive bias, neurological tendency, and it's a bit of a corruption, it's a little bit of a perversion in the software to externalize. Like, I'm the client, say, or I'm the self-defense student. It's the same thing in the essence of what I'm talking about. I don't want it to be on me. I want you to train me in a system. What's that? That's a word. That's a nominalization. You know, karate doesn't exist. It's not a thing in the same way that NLP doesn't exist. These are just ideas that we consent to as we interact with each other. So it's not external to you. You don't get trained in a system and then the therapist or the system makes you better. You have to embrace that systemically and make it work using ferocity of intent. And sometimes you just got to go for it and be determined and say, this is going to happen now because I say so. And then time and space and reality will bend to your will. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Cheers.